Meanwhile, President Trump raising doubts about Rex Tillerson's future as Secretary of State. Here's what the president said when asked about Tillerson's status during an interview with Laura Ingraham.
Rex is in there working hard. He's doing his best. He's doing the best he can.
Is he going to be with you for the duration?
Well, we'll see. I don't know who's going to be. Duration, I think the duration.
We'll see. Joining me now, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Fox Business contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, good to see you. Now, Rex Tillerson, the president, don't see eye to eye on everything. The president has said as much. It's probably not that unusual for a Secretary of State and a president, but might their differences lead to his departure?
Well, I wouldn't read too much into that statement. You know, I think the average tenure for cabinet secretaries is around 2 years. So it's actually unusual to have somebody last the full time. But I think you need to let this play out a little bit more. Certainly, I think the president's views are not entirely implemented throughout the bureaucracy. I think that's been a problem for the past year. I don't think he has full control of the national security bureaucracy, and I think that inevitably poses a problem for him.
Well, of course, Rex Tillerson is not a bureaucrat. I mean, he came from the outside of the Beltway. But the dispute that they have, and the president has spelled it out, specifically involves the toughness of Rex Tillerson on issues like North Korea, on issues like Iran. I think the president thinks those countries are less susceptible to negotiation than they are to real hard action, don't you think?
Yeah, look, I think the president has a clearer view of the threats posed by Iran and North Korea's nuclear programs than most of the rest of his government.
Would that include Rex, by the way?
One of the problems, well, I think one of Secretary Tillerson's problems is that because he doesn't have political undersecretaries and assistant secretaries out to help him in running the bureaucracy, what he reflects is when he hears from the career people at the State Department who were largely responsible for helping to negotiate, let's say, the Iran deal and to implement it for the past 2 years. Here's a news flash. They think it's a great deal. And if he's not hearing from other people inside who think it's a terrible deal like the president, it shouldn't be much of a surprise there's a disconnect. I mean, I can tell you as an example, my first job for George W. Bush was get us out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty of 1972. And of the hundreds of people who worked for me when I was undersecretary, I don't think any of them agreed with what George W. Bush wanted to do. So there's a huge difference between having subordinates at state or defense or the intelligence community who actually agree with the president's broad principles.
Well, here's a news flash for the bureaucrats. The president was elected, and he is in charge. And as President Reagan overruled the bureaucracy and all of the scaredy pants, if you will, in the State Department when he went to Berlin and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. They didn't want him to say it. He said it anyway because he was president. This president is about to go to China, and he's going to negotiate a lot harder than probably a lot of people at the State Department would want him to negotiate. What should he be saying to the Chinese, specifically about North Korea?
Well, I think he's in an ideal position to say to Xi Jinping very clearly what he said to the world at the United Nations, that denuclearization is the only way forward for North Korea. China has a unique capability to make that happen, and I think he should say to Xi Jinping, look, we can do this the easy way together, or we can do it the hard way when we act on our own accord. We are very serious. We will not leave this particular crisis that we face today to see North Korea with nuclear weapons. Now, you can either force them to give those weapons up peacefully. We can reunite the peninsula. You can get rid of the Kim regime. There are a lot of things we could do. But if at the end of the day they still have nuclear weapons, you better realize, Mr. Xi Jinping, that we are prepared to use military force. And I think it would come with particular effectiveness from the president who, over coffee and cake at Mar-a-Lago some months ago, announced he had just launched 60 cruise missiles at Syria.
Over a beautiful chocolate cake, as the president said. And we should remember that was the last time those two gentlemen met. I don't think it was accidental that it happened. He happened to announce the targeting of Syria at the moment that the Chinese leader was there to prove that his words mean action, right?
Right, and what was the subject matter of that attack by the cruise missiles? Syria's use of chemical weapons,
right.
Another weapon of mass destruction. The United States, very clear on its position against the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. The Chinese have not been so serious, unfortunately. This is another good time to make it clear to Xi Jinping, Neville Chamberlain is not in the White House, it's Donald Trump.